Hey, welcome to the Advance. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan of Texas Scorecards here with Brandon Walton. January 14th, 2025.
Yes. Hard to believe. I mean, this is a date we've talked about. How many times have we said the legislative session will begin on January 14th, 2025? Been saying it since the last one, and it's crazy that now the date is actually here. And this is one that's been talked about a lot, not just because of the legislation that is hopefully going to pass this session that grassroots activists have been calling for, but also because of literally what's going to happen today, which is, of course, the race for Texas House Speaker.
Yeah, so we're right now just right at about 3 hours out from members of both the House and the Senate being sworn into office. Now, for the senators, that's only half of them, because of course half of them were elected 2 years ago to 4-year terms. In the Texas House, everything resets to zero in a lot of ways. They all get sworn in as members of the Texas House of Representatives. Administering their oath will be the Secretary of State, Jane Nelson. And then, Brandon, is when, I guess the work begins of organizing themselves.
Well, exactly. And like I said, the work this session is actually a bit different compared to previous sessions, where you either didn't have any contested race for House Speaker, there was only one candidate, or you had maybe one challenger, but they only had a few votes. This is very different. As we sit right now, right? I mean, the session's just starting in less than 3 hours, and there's already no consensus. No candidate for Speaker of the House has come out with a majority of members' votes, okay? Essentially right now you have 3 candidates in the race. You have the Republican nominee, David Cook, who won the Republican caucus's nomination in December. And, according to the caucus bylaws, the party rules, platform, etc., that should have been it, right? Because Texas, of course, we have a Republican majority, actually grew that Republican majority in the November election. So instead of 86 Republicans like there were last session, you actually have 88. So 88 Republicans and 62 Democrats making up this body. But unfortunately, what you've seen is you have a minority of Republicans saying, no, we don't want to support the Republican caucus's nominee. We're going to try to cut a deal with Democrats to put Dustin Burrows, a state representative from Lubbock, who actually lost the Republican nomination. He lost that, and then now is trying to put together something with Democrats. Important to note, as of right now, and as has been the case for over a month now, Dustin Burrows has more Democrat support than he has Republicans, at least publicly. David Cook continues to have a majority of Republican members and has actually added members during this time. And again, I want to emphasize, neither has come out with 76 votes, which is what it takes. And you do have that third candidate putting a little bit of a wrinkle in things, which is that you do have one Democrat, Ana Maria Ramos. There's a question about how much support does she get with Democrats?
Well, and let's note, Dustin Burrows did actually put out a list that said that claiming to have 76 votes, but within hours of putting out that list, you saw 8 members, Republicans and Democrats, drop off saying, no, we're not supporting him. We're not backing Dustin Burrows. So we're coming in today in many ways a fairly new experience for a lot of us, of kind of blind as to kind of where the winds are blowing for the speakership.
Absolutely. One of the cool things today specifically, because it is the first day of the session, is that you have a lot of grassroots folks I know have seen, literally, I'm looking on Twitter, on Facebook this morning, people up at 4 or 5 in the morning saying they were getting on buses, they were getting in the car.
One bus has just pulled up here on Congress Avenue. We see some folks getting out there wearing Ban Democrat Chairs t-shirts. So we've got those folks now arriving.
Yeah, so you got a lot of those grassroots voters that are here. I see, they're wearing shirts, red shirts they wore last session, Ban Democrat Chairs, which has of course been probably the biggest topic when you look at the speaker's race, has been talking about ending that practice. Who would have thought that ending Democrat chairmanships in a state like Texas, when no other Republican state does this, would be such a controversial thing? And yet that's really what's been at the core of this race, is the power sharing structure that we've seen with Democrats. And if that changes today, and if it changes, if it's codified whenever they do the rules later on this week, that really changes things for the session.
Yeah, and look, I think that, like I said, this question of the organization of the House, it starts today with the election of the Speaker, but it continues during the week as they, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps on Thursday, the members of the House will begin debating the rules for the way they will govern themselves during the legislative session. One thing that Dustin Burrows has been saying when asked about this question of would he appoint Democrats to chair committees, Dustin Burrows said, "Well, that will be up to the members to decide. That's not for the Speaker. That's for the members." And yet, the rules currently are silent, meaning the Speaker currently decides whether or not a Democrat is the chair. The fact that he has not been willing to answer that question, kind of punting it in some ways disingenuously to the House rules process. So certainly there was a move 4 years ago and 2 years ago to embody into to place into the rules this question of Democrat chairing committees, and that was defeated by the members. And so it's kind of disingenuous for Dustin Burrows to make that claim. But this is where both people and policy both matter, right? Where you need the people willing to do the right thing, and you need to put the policies in place.
Absolutely. I mean, you literally remember 2 years ago when they didn't even have a vote, right? I mean, Dustin Burrows is saying they'll vote on this on the rules. Well, if things are like they were 2 years ago, you had a Democrat parliamentarian say, no, you can't rule on that. Dave Phelan, the outgoing Speaker of the House, siding with the Democrats, saying, no, we're not even going to have a vote on this. And what that allowed, right, in practice is that for the last 2 years, you've had a number of Republicans that have been able to say, hey, look, I've never supported Democrat chairs because they never had the opportunity to vote on it.
Right.
Let's make it very clear. I think this race for Speaker, the very first vote they're going to be taking, that is a vote on whether Democrats should be put in as chairs.
And yes, you talked briefly about the parliamentarian. For those of you who are going to be watching the stream, probably won't be able to be in the chamber unless you're already kind of in line back in there. But for those watching, there's a lot of deference paid to the parliamentarian. These are usually lawyers who are experts in Robert's Rules of Orders and the arcane legislative rules that govern legislative bodies. And as Brandon noted, for now 6-7 years, you've had Barack Obama's lawyer, a guy named Hugh Brady, serving as the kind of lead parliamentarian significantly, though, and that's even included on the opening day. Significantly, you had Jane Nelson about a week ago announce that she was not going to have Hugh Brady, the Democrat Obama lawyer, serving as parliamentarian, sending maybe a signal there as to kind of where the statewide officials, the Secretary of State works for the governor of Texas. Certainly the governor of Texas saw a number of his priorities either outright killed or at least watered down, in part because of the parliamentarian's rulings over the past couple of years. So the fact that Hugh Brady, at least on this opening day, has been kicked to the side is indicative maybe of where of where some of the statewide officials are recognizing maybe they need something different in the Texas House.
Absolutely, and that's all going to happen. They get sworn in at noon. And I was looking back at some of the past years, they'll get to that Speaker vote pretty quickly if it's anything like previous years. So you could be seeing them start to lay that out and vote as early as 1:30, very, very potentially. That's what's happening in the House. There's also another chamber, right? There is a Senate, right? Sometimes we forget so much of the drama and the questions around the session have surrounded the House just because it's been such a question mark. The Senate has been a little bit more predictable in the past years. Don't think this year's going to be any different. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has essentially said that they're going to work quickly to pass conservative priorities, and they're going to put that ball in the House's court, and it'll be up to them. In years past, in sessions past, we've seen this play out where the Senate has passed a lot of this legislation early, and then we're talking about the House sort of dragging its feet on that. Change in leadership could mean a change to that entire dynamic.
Right, and look, I've had a number of conversations, I know you have as well, with various members of the Texas Senate, and in the past, kind of that spirit of congeniality and all the goofy things that people say when they're trying to sound like statesmen. This Texas Senate has tended to try to meet the House in the halfway, at least on terms of their calendars, at least in terms of moving legislation, and then at the end, kind of backing the House members from their regions call by saying, oh well, things didn't ran out of time, things got messed up. I don't think we're going to see that. My conversations with members of the Texas Senate have said that they're not interested in playing that game. Many of them have gotten frustrated with Dustin Burrows and Dade Phelan, and before Dade Phelan, Dennis Bonnen, Joe Strauss, playing a game of blaming the Senate, of fighting the Senate. And the Texas Senate has, at least under Dan Patrick, they have reliably passed the grassroots conservative agenda, and it's always been kind of either watered down or killed over in the Texas House. So I think this session, we're going to see the Senate perhaps even acting faster than they have before in moving priority legislation.
Absolutely. And so, the show's called The Advance, where this is the first week. We're going to be doing this every week during session, every Tuesday morning. And one of the things we want to do with this, especially for people who are following the legislature, who want to be engaged in the process, is talk a little bit about what's coming up in the days, maybe weeks ahead. I think since this is the first day of session, we talk about maybe a little bit more broadly what's ahead on the calendar. But okay, so they have the vote for House Speaker today. What's next?
Yeah, in the Texas House, of course, there's always going to be, where they're talking David Cook, Dustin Burrows, whoever wins the speakership, there's going to be a couple of week period where they are, and after the rules, where they're appointing chairs, appointing committees. The members are allowed under the rules based on their seniority to put in their picks. It's kind of you're talking about wrangling 150 cats, all of whom think they should be the junior class president, right? So they're going to be doing that. Meanwhile, the Texas Senate, again, because only half of them are new, if you will, although many of them are returning, they get to move a little more quickly. But for all of them, there is the stricture of the Texas Constitution that forbids legislation from being considered until the 60th day, unless the governor acts by declaring something an emergency.
Right.
And so in many ways, starting, call it tomorrow, call it Friday, Monday, people are going to start looking across the street. I'm looking right now at the governor's mansion, wondering when is the governor going to issue his priorities, because when the governor issues those priorities, both the House and the Senate can immediately get to work on things related to those items.
Exactly. And looking at some past sessions, those have come in the last two sessions. They've come later than they traditionally have. Normally you'd see them sort of around the end of January. I think they'd been pushed into February the last couple sessions. But the question is, we're talking a lot about the legislature, especially the Texas House, maybe moving with a more deliberate speed. And so the governor could certainly match that and put those priorities out maybe sooner than he was planning on. For the next 60 days, right, we said, okay, so they only have until after 60 days to pass
Which is
bills.
about March 15th.
Yeah. They've got this time. They can't pass any bills unless the governor says that they're a priority emergency item. But that's also the amount of time they have to file bills. So after that 60th day, essentially, you can't file any legislation. There's some exceptions to that, but broadly speaking, you can't file bills after that 60th day. And so that's really when things start moving. The question is, will the House be different this time as far as appointing committees as well, right? That's taken several weeks before. If David Cook or Dustin Burrows or someone else comes in, do they appoint committees faster than they have before? There's a lot that can be done to speed up this process so that there's not that moment at the end of the session that we've seen time and time again where members, leadership have said, well, we ran out of time.
Right. And look, one thing we want to make sure we're doing here on The Advance is we want to be talking about the things you're tracking. We want to talk about things that you're paying attention to. So when you're watching this, whether you're watching us live or you watch us on recorded here on X, Facebook, or YouTube, throw into the comments things that you're interested in us watching, us paying attention to, so we can make sure we give you some heads up. Part of what we want to make sure we're doing is helping when you can impose yourself into the process to make a difference. At
Yep.
Texas Scorecard, we want to make sure you're active, make sure that you're engaged, make sure you have the tools to be effectively engaged as a citizen.
Absolutely. And we're going to be here every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Whether you're watching us on YouTube, X, Facebook, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Wherever you watch your live videos, we're going to be here.
So thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you have a great Tuesday. And Brandon, let's go inside and see what happens.
Absolutely. We'll see you next week.